You're worthless and terrible. And if the company allowed it, I would straight up kill you myself.
Jay's awesome.
You've got a lot of guts for a barely sentient toaster.
You know why I keep you around here? Dropped this, silly.
Oh, hi. I bet you have a lot of questions. Let me start out by introducing myself. I'm Control, and I'd love to be your host for today. I'm a nobody from a cosmic nowhere tasked with the sole function of hopping from world to world and being a sort of ferryman or guide to the afterlife. But what is my connection to the show? Well, I've been a fan of this show for a long time, and even though I only really got into it about halfway through its runtime, I've been keeping up with it since it came out. So why do I bring us all here today? For the simple purpose of reminding us what the show means to us, and more specifically, why I think it's the best animated YouTube show of all time. In this video, I will not be comparing and contrasting nor slandering other shows that much. This is simply a conversation of all things Murder Drones does right, and also a lot of things it does wrong, because saying this show is without flaws is like saying the planet you stand on isn't going to turn to dust and blow away in a billion years. So let's answer our first question. What does this show mean to us? I think what Murder Drones means to us is that it's a staple of indie animation and a goldmine for creativity and new ideas. It is truly the most unique show of its kind and has become a safe space for myself and many others to express ourselves through. All of its fans have had a phenomenal time watching it grow throughout the years and seeing how the small team could pull off something so grand. It is my favorite show both because I enjoy it, but also I appreciate what it stands for, being a beacon of hope for people like me to start creating, because anybody can do it. And so what have I done with the creative inspiration given to me by Murder Drones? Well, I'm making this series. I started this series because Murder Drones recently concluded with its 8th and final episode, and if you know anything about me, you'd know I'm extremely disappointed with this episode, and how it was directed and how the characters and the story were used. However, I'm equally disappointed in how most of the fan base is just okay with this episode. I'm not saying that anyone should feel bad for liking the episode, and if you liked it, then I'm happy for you. But I am saying that I think it's weird how so many people can overlook how the episode has blatantly gone against so much Murder Drones has stood for. It feels incredibly rushed, and most of the characters' actions throughout the series are completely ignored. I have a crackpot theory about why this is the case and why it may or may not be Liam Vickers' fault in the long run. I'm not going to get into any of that here. This isn't a review of episode 8, and I most certainly do not condone sending real hate to Mr. Vickers for how it turned out. But the reason I wanted to make this series is to remind the community that we shouldn't accept how Murder Drones ended, but we should instead reflect on how incredible the rest of the show was. So what is this series, you might ask? I want to go back, all the way to the beginning, and do an in-depth analysis of each episode, and heavily analyze the characters, plot, and episode, and really understand why Murder Drones is the greatest animated show of all time. The pilot starts off with a chunk of dialogue from our protagonist explaining the exposition and the need-to-know basis of the Murder Drones series. I'm not going to explain any of it to you because none of it's important. Uzi's worldview is completely shattered down the line and disproves pretty much everything she says here, so moving swiftly on to when we actually get to meet Uzi, and we're basically thrust headfirst into her character. But before we get into any of that, I want to point out something about this series that truly makes it timeless, and that's the fact you can rewatch it 100 times and still miss something about it. For example, in this episode, most people think the first instance of the Solver being seen in the show is at 26:16 when Uzi's eyes flash yellow and we can see the sign, but previously in the episode, during the Jay versus Uzi fight, you can see Uzi's eye flash to the Solver and deflects a bullet at 22:47. But that's not even the earliest image, because literally in the intro at 1:45, when the title says Murder Drones, and that flashes on screen, the first image to pop up is the Solver. Holy shit, how have I never noticed this before? I didn't notice it until I rewatched the episode frame by frame for this video, and there are probably more instances of it that I haven't even noticed yet. But anyway, back to Uzi. As previously mentioned, I will be compiling a list of each character's attributes and how they are written, and then I'll go over that more in depth once the episode is over. But from this opening, we can immediately tell an incredible amount about her. She's very smart, with her being capable of building a mostly functioning railgun, which up to this point nobody else has even tried. But we can also tell that she is spiteful and irrational, as well as a little bit unhinged. But we don't get a motive behind her behaviors until the next scene, which is a great way to fully introduce your character, because it doesn't feel like every single drop of Uzi's character has been crammed into a 30-second intro. We get her behaviors, and the next scene her motives, and in the next couple of scenes we get her actions. Uzi is a phenomenally written character in the pilot, and she only gets better as we continue. Oh, and also I'm doing a character analysis for the Railgun, and you can't stop me. The Railgun is my favorite character. We also get into the Railgun's behaviors in this scene too, as being extremely volatile, and we also get the Railgun's motives in the next scene. It's to shoot things. But as mentioned, the next scene is her in the ER after the Railgun malfunction. We see a quick shot of Lizzie and Doll, two of her classmates that taunt her. The one on the left, Lizzie, is basically a nothing character and will be ignored, but on the right is Doll, and she is super important. But at the moment, just remember for later that she shows up in the scene. You got that? Awesome. Moving on. In the ER scene, we learn about Thad, who is also kind of a nothing character, but he does everything a minor character should, as he causes Uzi to open up to him and the viewer about her motives, and also pressures her to continue on her journey. He is incredibly well done for the minor role he plays. Uzi and Thad's conversation give away that Uzi is Khan's daughter, who's the leader of the bunker base thingy they're in, and they definitely do not have the best relationship. And her motives is that she wants to sneak to the Murder Drone lair to repair her railgun and make her dad proud of her by, shooting them all. Boom, next scene. It's 3 o'clock in the goddamn morning. Uzi wakes up, grabs her railgun, gets ready, steals Khan's master door key. This will be more important later. Oh, and there's so much detail and foreshadowing in the scene. You can see a picture of Uzi's mother in the top left that's been punctured by the Murder Drone's nanite acid. And also a sticky note that says Doors is greater than Uzi, which foreshadows Khan leaving her behind later on. Fuck, this is good. Okay, I gotta lock in or else this video is gonna be 20 hours long. What I am gonna stop the video to say here is the music for Murder Drones is so incredibly good. I have no idea how to pronounce the name of the guy who made any of this stuff, so I'm just going to put his name up on screen and you can check him out if you haven't already. And speaking of which, if you haven't, please do. He didn't just cook with this soundtrack, he prepared a 5.5 out of 5-star meal. The soundtrack sounds like if Portal was made into a Doom-like first-person shooter, and I cannot get enough of this shit. The music plays so well into the story, and it is constant. So many other shows will have next to no music, and Murder Drones goes completely against that. You can struggle to find a point that doesn't have at least ambience. Never mind the fact that every encounter's stakes are risen tenfold because of the slamming techno music in your ears. I'm not joking when I say I probably have 75% of the entire soundtrack on my playlist. So yeah, shout out to this guy, go listen to him if you haven't. But anyway, back to the episode. The next scene is Uzi attempting to sneak out of the bunker, establishing that the master door key she has the capability to open multiple doors at once. This is incredibly clever and subtle setup for an absolutely amazing scene I'll get to later. Khan catches Uzi sneaking out and they have a conversation that further explains their relationship, but I won't get into this part too much. The main thing you need to know is that Khan explains about Uzi's dead mother and that Khan has a little remote thingy that can close doors remotely, which is pretty cool. Oh, and also this scene is funny, so you've got that too. The scene also very well showcases the location, importance, and structure of each of the 3 doors, very subtly without taking too much time to focus on them, which makes the future scene I'm talking about infinitely better because all the setup in this scene. It's genuinely amazing how every single second of this pilot relates to another scene of itself or the future of the series. It's written incredibly well. In the next scene, Uzi has left the safety of the bunker and trudges across the frozen wasteland to the Murder Drone lair while an ominous tune plays in the background, and she approaches this massive spire of corpses. Metal as fuck, by the way, and how the music abruptly changes whenever she looks at it, and you can hear whispering from the sky. It gives such an impact to how in over her head she is. She enters into the lair and sees this large spider leg drop pod, which might I add is a fucking sick as hell spaceship design. This show does not get enough credit for how well the visual designs of these assets are. Like, this spaceship design is probably one of my favorites, ever. The idea of a single man spacefaring vehicle that has legs and can crawl around on asteroids and leap off of things is just incredibly cool and unique and not something I've seen before. But more than that, the visual design for all of the drones, Uzi's railgun, the Eldritch monster in episode 2, the solver, it's all just incredibly visually impressive and shows off a lot of design talent. You can really see and feel the passion that was put into this project, into every asset that's used. And even though the animation quality obviously gets better as the episodes progress, I still think the pilot holds up in almost every respect. And it definitely does not look bad, even compared to the other episodes. And despite not being the best animation-wise, I still like it. Well, anyway, quality-related tangent aside, Uzi finds the last piece of her railgun when suddenly one of the murder drones comes back and lands on the ship, provoking Uzi to hide. The scene that precedes is just incredibly fucking baller. Uzi watches the murder drone with a mirror shard, cool as hell by the way, only to see the murder drone has completely turned around between shots and lunges for her, also cool as hell. Uzi quickly assembles her railgun just in time for the fight to start. And I won't explain the entire fight to you, you can just watch it again.
Oh, and they said pirating all that anime was useless.
Stop. This is it. What you're about to watch is, at least personally, my favorite moment, not only in this show, but possibly in any show ever. Of all the games I played and all the shows I've watched, this is one of the coolest moments I've seen. The only other thing that ties it, and what I think is probably partially responsible for inspiring it, is the Doom Eternal Mars Core mission where you use the BFG 10,000 to blow a hole in the surface of Mars. And I mean, you can probably see the ties here between Uzi's railgun and the BFG, and I don't think I should be shamed for making that connection. I mean, just look at him. But being that this is a video about what murder drones means to us, I want to tell you what this show means to me. And specifically, this is the moment that it started meaning anything to me whatsoever. As a bit of background, my first real watch of this show was around August of last year, somewhere around when episode 6 came out. I had known about it for a long time, but had never found the time to watch it until eventually I got sick one day and stayed home and decided to give it a shot. I was enjoying it so far, laying haphazardly on my bed staring down at my computer, which I had awkwardly positioned on the floor, when this scene came on. Immediately I fell in love with this show. It's almost hard to explain, but it's very rare to see a piece of media go to this length to just show you something cool. But regardless of the intent or the execution of this scene, it absolutely grabbed my attention and made me fall in love with this show. Hell, whenever I think of murder drones, I see this moment and I see the railgun. I see Uzi sending in to cyber hell with one of the coolest animated fight scenes I'd seen in a long time. This is why the railgun is my favorite character, as much of a joke as that is. To me, the railgun is a symbol for everything Murder Drones represents and stands for, because in this moment you can truly see what they were going for, and by God, did they not just hit the mark, they evaporated it. Well, I'll probably be back to rant about the railgun later, but for now, let's get back to Uzi. We probably now have every piece of her character. Her behaviors, she may be edgy, spiteful, irrational, and also a great deal insecure, but she's also smart, cunning, and will take nobody's shit. She's a reliable, but also amazingly written character with all of her flaws and attributes. Her motives just give her another layer of complexity. She wants to impress her dad, but also prove to the rest of the colony that she is just as good or better than the rest of them. And finally, her actions, well, she's fucking badass, and her actions align perfectly with her motivations and character. Uzi is a solidly built character. But after this, we're introduced to N, and immediately we're introduced to his behaviors. But first and foremost, I want to establish something for later, that being that a worker and murder drone can both feel pain. Uzi reacts to being stabbed with N's tail and also getting thrown into the barricade, while N expressively says his head hurts after getting shot with the railgun. Uzi also winces from the pain of the nanite acid later in the scene, and this will be important for later episodes when it becomes a blurred line whether or not they actually feel pain. N's character is described to us as he's a lovable idiot, more muscle than mind, but also heavily optimistic and cheerful. His motives are described to us in the next scene. He was given a job and he just wants to do the best he can do at it. And his actions revolve entirely around protecting his friends. I'm gonna be honest, this all N ever is. His character development happens in like one episode that I'll get to later on in the series, and then he's the exact same character for the rest of the show. I understand why people like him, because he's a simple character who's nice to everyone that people can latch onto. But for the purposes of this video, N will mostly be ignored. I don't think he's a bad character, but he never changes, and he never has any character growth. He never has any moments that test him or his character, except for the one thing I'll get to later. He's just so flat. I really hate to say that about him, but he is and always will be a mid to high tier character. But that will never change. It just makes him so boring to me. And I know that's a complaint that a lot of people have about his character, which I can completely understand, but I can also completely understand all the people that do really like him.
Sure, I love doing anything. Sweet,
However, the next two characters we are introduced to are V and J, and dear God, are they the exact opposite of N. We only get a one-dimensional behavior analysis from V, but we get a lot of behavior and motives from J. We can tell that V is insane and kind of dumb, being too enraptured in her work to even remember N's name. We can also tell that J is a classic bully character, but also she's a leader, values effective work, and is brave and commanding. We can also tell from her dialogue and her motives that she serves some kind of company that we automatically assume is J.C. Jensen from Uzi's exposition at the beginning of the episode. Now, if you know literally anything about me, I go feral over Jay's character, because I think she's awesome and has an insane amount of potential.
Jay's awesome.
Damn right, N. Jay is awesome. However, I'm completely putting my biases aside to discuss that Jay's intro sequence was written way better than V's, giving us way more about Jay's character. V's intro sequence was really just a dig on N, and I don't really think that this is a huge issue because V plays a fairly minor role in episode 1. But that's it for them for now. We learn about how the murder drones need oil to survive, and this point is rarely ever brought up again, so I will rarely ever bring it up again. Uzi runs away and we get another scene of V and J. V doesn't really get any new developments, and we get a continuation of Jay's bully character. But we also get the sense that she's the most intelligent one at the team, because she's awesome, as she knows exactly what happened to N and when his optics were disabled and how to get him to reboot. N then ditches them and goes after Uzi, and this is where we get that scene. The one I was talking about earlier being set up in the bunker, and I'd like to talk at length about how amazing this scene is. We see Uzi run back to the bunker and attempt to use the master door key to lock out N, and as the music slowly swells, getting louder and louder until Uzi's eyes go wide and the camera zooms out to the first oh shit moment. N has caught the door, and slowly pries it open as everyone watches in horror. The music kicks back up again as N has a quick gag about how fucked everybody is, and then swings his tail inside and sticks the master door key to the panel. And this is our second oh shit moment, because N has just outsmarted Uzi and the entire bunker. And the music, sounding like an alarm blaring in the distance, amplifies that the situation just went bad to worst case scenario. Before we even see the doors open, we can immediately tell in a split second that N sticking the master door key to the panel is going to open all of the big doors we've been told are so impenetrable up until this point. We get a wide shot of all the doors opening up, everyone being entirely defenseless, and then the slaughter starts. But he doesn't just shoot them all once and that's the end of it. No, it's a long, grueling task that takes effort from N and shows off the brutality of this scene. One of the worker drones is straight up glory killed, another guy explodes into guts by a missile, one of these poor fuckers gets straight up jumped, and the last guy gets lasered. This has another huge benefit on top of how great this scene is in general, because it also sets up the last fight by showing off a variety of things that the murder drones are capable of. And then at the very end, we see Uzi's railgun, the best character, recharge as she spins on her heels to see nothing. Just a wide shot of the corridor filled with the people she got killed. This on its own would be an amazing scene, but this shit keeps going, and I might even say it gets better. Khan shows up and has a moment of horror as he realizes what has happened, and throws a line of dialogue at Uzi to tell her that she failed. Not literally, but figuratively. She set out to earn his respect, and he has made it very clear that he does not approve of her or her actions. Just before N slams down and makes an entrance for himself, before stabbing Uzi, giving Khan a chance to stand up for himself and save her. But he doesn't, and runs away, sealing the last door and escaping with his life. This scene is so well written, it's mind-boggling how anyone even came up with this shit. It gets even better as the red lights kick on and there's just pure silence, only accompanied by blaring alarms, and Uzi's arm falls to her side as she finally gives up. So good, man. So good. After this, we get another scene with V and J. V's character doesn't develop any more than it already has, but Jay's character changes entirely. For a reason, and for a brief moment. Jay is, for a moment, completely proud of N. She doesn't like him, she still thinks he sucks. But N just proved himself to her. And to her, this is a step in the right direction, that maybe he can be useful, and maybe he can be a valued member of the team. But these feelings are short-lived as N confesses to her in the questions he has of their mission, and questions their place in this world. To Jay, this is an utter betrayal, but also calls back to her intro sequence where she says if given a reason to, she would kill N, and that's what she does by implanting a virus in him. It's very easy to hate Jay at this moment, and in fact that's kind of what you're supposed to do. But if you really take a look at her character and motives, N is a traitor. What else was she supposed to think? Even if Jay is fighting for a foul cause or misguided like V is, she was raised and trained with only one goal in mind. To her, the extinction of the worker drone population isn't evil, it's doing them a favor. N is the evil one here. At least to her. Jay plants this virus in N, and Uzi fixes him, and the two of them go to save the rest of the colony. There isn't too much to talk about during the climactic fight scene. It's really good. We don't get too much more insight into their characters, but we do get some. Once again, mostly for Jay. We get that she is brave and fearless, and she keeps fighting after all the abuse that Uzi puts her through. But she's also stubborn, but not stupid, as she stops to gloat at Uzi before killing her, which gives Uzi the upper hand. This is a great portrayal of Jay's overall character. She is a loyal, brave, and stubborn character, and will fight to the end for what she thinks is right. Despite being heavily skewed, she has a proper moral compass, but we'll get into Jay's morality later in the series. The only other thing we get are more moments of Uzi being badass and is more of himself, and V being solidified as the weakest murder drone after she gets one-tapped by N's foot, of all things. And right after N took a railgun to the face, and Jay took a mass beating before they went down. Poor V. We also get to see the second out of 3 railgun shots. This one isn't as cool as the first one, but still awesome as fuck. It's also nice to see my first and second favorite characters getting along. Now that Jay is dead and V is captured, the rest of the episode that plays out isn't particularly important to the plot, other than Dull gets some screen time. Yay! Uzi says some BS about killing all humans and never goes anywhere, so we'll just skip to the end, where for a few frames we can see 3 spaceships headed toward the planet, carrying Jay and Tessa. I'm not entirely sure why this is here, because if the spaceship is carrying Jay, but Jay was already murdered by the railgun on the... Whatever, man. We'll get into that later when Jay comes back to life for some reason. I mean, I'm not complaining because she's awesome and stuff, but it just doesn't make sense. This episode is legitimately awesome. It does so many things right, and is genuinely one of the best animated pilots I've ever seen. No show has ever developed this many intricate character interactions, done this much foreshadowing, had this many action scenes, and had this much growth and level of writing in a single episode, much less the pilot ever before. But now it's time for the important stuff. If you've been following along so far, I'm going to compile what we know about the story and the characters, and we're going to use this line of events to very clearly explain what is happening in the story, and for the future, what should have been happening. There are many points in the story where characters act unaccording to their character, and I will call out these moments and explain why they should be different. But to do that, we need an in-depth look at each one of the characters, and as previously stated, N will be exempt from the end episode analysis, as I genuinely cannot find a moment in the show where he acts out of character or has trouble acting in a way unnatural to him, except once in a later episode, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Cured. You know why I keep you around here?
As we discuss each character, I'll throw up a character card on screen for you to look at, and I'll be modifying these cards later as characters develop, and we can use these cards to tell whether or not a character's actions are justifiable, as well as give a clear timeline for how the character advances throughout the series. First, we'll start with V. For being a main character moving forward, mostly from episodes 3-4 onwards, she is surprisingly underrepresented in this episode. She gets way more spotlight in subsequent episodes, so her taking a minor role here isn't an issue as stated before. All we get so far is V is kind of a weak link. She's not the smartest, gets distracted easily, and is really only good at fighting those who cannot fight back. This really isn't a good look for V, and I think she could have been done a little better. Once again, this episode was more supposed to be about Jay, In, and Uzi, so her image gets better later on. Next up is Doll and Lizzie. I'm going to lump them together this time because they come up again together later. They're both kind of your standard background characters, but it is important to revisit these moments. We don't get much from their personalities other than they both seem to be generally antagonistic to Uzi. Now, Khan. He's a shitty father who mercy killed his wife and is raising a daughter he doesn't spend time with and is struggling with his own self-worth. Holy shit, that would be really heavy if the show didn't play it off as a joke most of the time. Luckily, Khan isn't a particularly important character in this series, so it's okay for him to be there to drive Uzi forward more. And for Uzi, I've already discussed at length about her behaviors, motives, and actions. Uzi's a really well-written character in this episode, and I won't bore you by reiterating what I've already said. Now for the J. Excuse me while I go on a rant now. I have a lot to say about Jay. Most primarily, Jay is my favorite character, and I'd like to highlight why. For this, I'll also call forth information from other episodes, so just be warned. Jay seems like a weird character choice to like above the other characters who are better written and have more screen time. I'll go ahead and say I have a soft spot for characters who are hardasses on the outside but sweet on the inside, and that's what Jay is. You can really see this in episode 1 versus episode 5. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. Jay isn't evil. If the creators had wanted us to hate Jay, they should have done a better job. Jay is a tragic character who befriended Tessa at probably a young age and was her friend and companion for many years while other drones were brought in. I don't know for sure, but it is heavily implied that she was the first drone Tessa adopted, saying another one when Sin is brought in. And this is why she bullies the others, because she's jealous she can't be only with Tessa or Tessa's favorite. It makes much more sense that Jay's memory in the pilot episode is wiped alongside the rest of them, but the Jay copy that comes down with Tessa does remember her past, and is why she's so loyal to Tessa. Jay does not know that Sin has killed and taken Tessa's skin, and therefore would be furious to know what Sin had done. Jay wouldn't work for Sin in a million years. Jay is loyal and stubborn, but she's not stupid. And she knows what Sin would do. Episode 8 butchers Jay's character and paints her in the completely wrong light, and it's part of the reason why I'm so angry at that episode. My anger towards episode 8 is kind of the whole reason why I'm making this series, but we'll get there in time. For now, I know that what I just told you is what Jay's character really is and what really makes the most sense and what is explained by the series, and I'll give more evidence for this in subsequent episodes. But for now, hashtag justice for Jay. Oh, there it is. I was wondering how long that was going to take to show up. Let's see, where was I? Murder Drones has to have my favorite pilot of all time, and I bet a lot of people can see why. If this entire analysis got anything past you, it should be that the pilot is written incredibly well, and you can really see how much time was poured into it. These and many more reasons are why I consider wholeheartedly Murder Drones to be the figurehead to represent all of indie animation. And I at least think I'm somewhat qualified to make that statement because I have seen a lot of shows, and I mean a lot of them. There are two other names that are vastly more popular that other people would probably like to try and put on that pedestal, and I think those people are insane. Popularity doesn't mean quality, however, I am not reviewing these shows, so I shall not speak on them. And I don't like to give my criticism in a way where I can't also provide feedback, and I also don't want to shit on something that other people enjoy without seeing it from their side. So maybe one day I'll review these shows, but I'd like to become more familiar with the reasons why people like them and why I don't. Murder Drones takes this spot partially because it isn't as popular. Don't get me wrong, 20 to 30 so million views is not a small amount, but compared to these other big names, it has a small fan base. Murder Drones stands for indie animations because of that reason too, but I think the biggest reason why they're deserving of this honor is because they are the most unique show out there. Don't get me wrong, many of these other shows are unique and interesting, but not in the ways that Murder Drones is. It crosses so many lines in a good way, expanding the ways stories are told in indie animation. When I think of a small group of nobodies coming together with a story and a dream, and putting hours and hours of thought and work into a hand-animated show to go on a free streaming platform of all places, I think of Murder Drones. I loved this episode, as you can probably tell by how much I praised it and how little I put it down. I think it's the best pilot ever made. Let me throw a list up here, of all 8 episodes and where I would put them. Keep in mind that as I continue this series, I will almost definitely change my mind about the placements a couple times, and I hope after hearing me out, you will too. But as for the pilot, and after an absurd amount of deliberation, I've decided to place it second on the list as the second best Murder Drones episode. I put a lot of thought into putting it first because it's the only episode to have this much content and not screw anything up. And in the future, I might bump it up to first. But as for now, I have 2 other episodes in mind that are heavily contending for first place, and I think the pilot might have lost that race and will be settled for second. At least for now. But I think that'll do it for this episode. Thank you again for watching all the way through. It means a lot to me that anyone would support this series at all. Do any of the dumb YouTube stuff if you want. I'm not making this series to become popular, but I do want to reach the Murder Drones community and remind us what this show means to us and to not let it go so easily. I'd love to hear anything you have to say in the comments, whether it be your own opinions, or telling me to jump into a black hole, or whether I'll get absolutely zero interaction on this video whatsoever. All valid options. Well, again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this show as much as I do, and for now, I'll see you in the next part of my tribute to Murder Drones. Thank you again so much for watching. This is the first video I've ever made, so I understand it's probably kind of shit, but I have a lot of other videos in the making that I'm more proud of than this one, so I think this was an alright landing point. I appreciate for any support you give or anything you do whatsoever. I don't know, I'm just kind of talking out of my ass at this point. I don't have a script. I just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it. I have some other videos I think you might enjoy. I like talking about movies and games and game design and that sort of thing. And I have another video I'm going to make about the game design of a few other games that I like to play and how I'm going to use those to eventually make my own game. But thanks for watching. Hope you liked it. It'll get better, I promise. Hashtag justice for Jay, buy gold, and fuck Zenith. Bye-bye.